And here we are. I'm about to do a thing that's, I know for a fact, it's gonna make some people angry. And you know what? That's okay. I'm about to rate every Final Fantasy game ever. Okay? Now, I have my own rating system. It's did not play baby, which means obviously didn't play it. Stupid, which means that game was stupid. Meh, which means I didn't really enjoy it a whole lot and may not have finished it because I did not enjoy it a whole lot. It's okay, which means it was passable, had some fun moments. It's all right. Might not go back to it for a long time. Shui means it was good. Would play multiple times. Super Shui means, oh my god, this is like some of the best of the best. Ultima Shui, I will play this forever with no complaints, aka it is perfection. So with that getting started, Theat Rhythm All-Star Carniv, did not play. Final Fantasy Echoes of Time, did not play. See, this might not take forever. Dirge of Cerberus, Lost Episode, did not play. This Dragon Quest looking thing, did not play. We about to hit a gut. Crystal Chronicles, okay, I actually did play this one. Crystal Chronicles, first Final Fantasy game on a Nintendo platform since like their split after the Super Nintendo going into N64 and they got mad and whatnot. It was on the GameCube, okay? Crystal Chronicles was interesting. It was very different from some previous Final Fantasies. Thought I had a pretty decent story. Thought it had some pretty kick-ass graphics for the time. And it's kind of cool to see that Crystal Chronicles has continued as kind of its own individual thing. However, I do not believe there's been another one for a while now. Like the last one I want to say was like Wii U, somewhere around in there, 3DS. I know they were on the DS and 3DS. That being said, it's okay. It's different from the other Final Fantasies, and for it being different, it's okay. I think it's an okay Final Fantasy. I don't even know what that is. Final Fantasy Dimensions, that's mobile. No, sir. Brave Exvius, no. That's mobile, I don't do that. Tactics S, I would have played this. But you didn't bring it over here, Japan, so I didn't play it. What is that? Final Fantasy, nope, didn't play that one either. Final Fantasy Explorers, okay, this one I actually did give a shot. Man, it was all right. Nothing really memorable. Nothing really that just like stuck out to me. Nothing that just like, it just didn't leave a very good lasting impression. It was not a garbage game. And for what it was, I could see they were trying to do something unique with Explorers. I just didn't want to play it, further on. Like I got bored halfway through it. And I think that was the biggest problem with it, is that it was boring. Crisis Core. Crisis Core did something that Final Fantasy VII needed, and that was fill in the plot holes and gaps that the game originally had back in the 90s. Crisis Core also introduced a really kick-ass battle system. Some people don't like the modulating phase roulette thing. I personally love it because it's an element that they never really had introduced into Final Fantasy at the time. Zack Fair, this game actually made me give a shit about Zack Fair. He was one of the coolest characters that they made in the 7 universe. His backstory was great. It also introduced some backstory for Sephiroth and the fact that he actually had friends in Soldier with Angeal and Genesis. It showed a really cool introduction with Cloud when he was still in Soldier. It further expanded upon the character that is Aerith, however you want to call her. I loved the dynamics between Zack and Aerith. It was so freaking cool. You had a little tidbit in there with Yuffie. It also showed the inner machinations of Shinra and what was leading up to it. And the climax was probably one of the saddest climaxes in a Final Fantasy game because we all knew what was going to happen, with Zack and whatnot. But it was so freaking cool. I enjoyed the battle system, enjoyed the summoning system. I enjoyed every bit of Crisis Core. Crisis Core is not only one of those games, it is not only one of those games that you need to play. Square Enix, it's one of those games that you need to remaster and release on current platforms. Like, holy shit, re-release this game. Holy shit. It is stuck on the PSP platform, and it's not exactly easy to get your hands on a PSP anymore. Like, re-release this game. Remaster it. I don't care what you got to do. Remaster it. Re-release this game. Wonderful game. Crisis Core. Ultima Shui. Absolutely. We'll play it forever. Abso-freaking-lutely. Monster Deep. Didn't play it. Ring of Fates. Didn't play it. Chocobo's Dungeon. Now, if we're talking the original Chocobo's Dungeon, which I think that's what this is. I'm looking real quick. It's okay. Cool little dungeon, tactical RPG. Actually, you know what? Man, I'm gonna move it down to man. Chocobo Dungeon's okay. Nah, you know what? Chocobo Dungeon's okay. Didn't leave a too big of a lasting impression on me. Probably wouldn't go back to it. Some people absolutely adore this game, which if they do, that's fine. All right, World of Final Fantasy. Now, I'm gonna ruffle some feathers here. The story was dumb. Shoehorning the Final Fantasy characters in there were dumb. The main characters were dumb. I honestly did not enjoy this game at all. I thought World of Final Fantasy was unenjoyable and stupid. I absolutely did not like it. Did not like it at all. Revenant Wings. Didn't play it. Need to. 4 Heroes of Light. It's okay. It's okay. Pretty cool little game. Pretty cool. Very similar to previous Final Fantasies. Similar. Not exactly alike. Story was kind of your typical-ish Final Fantasy, kind of harkening back to like 1 through 3. And for what it was, Heroes of Light was okay. It really, really was. It really was. Not, probably might not ever go back to it just because, again, it's locked to the DS. But it's okay. It really is okay. 15 A New Empire, didn't play it. Artnix, didn't play it. Crystal Bearers, didn't play it. My Life as a King. When the hell did that? Oh, right. No, didn't play it. My Life as a Dark Lord, didn't play it. Dirge of Cerberus. I'm going to be that guy. Dirge of Cerberus is super shui. Some people hate this game. I do not hate this game. You know why? Yeah, it's janky controls. Yeah, it's a little pretentious with getting gagged in there. You know what else it is? It's one of the better representations of Vincent that they ever did. Because, I'm sorry, what other way was there to present Vincent from a gameplay aspect than a third-person shooter? Yeah, it was a little janky. Yeah, it might have been a little bare bones and whatnot, but you know what? It was fun. It was fun. The story might not have been the best, but it did fill in some gaps with stuff with Genesis and, stuff like that. I would happily go back and play this again. And I love that they're acknowledging some of the stuff from this game in Intergrade. Like I said, there's some people out there, they wish this game would burn. I say, screw that. Dirge of Cerberus is amazing. Dissidia Duodecim is pretty freaking shui. It was a step up, and you know what? I'm going to put the original Dissidia up there too. They had never done something like this before with Final Fantasy. They had never done something like this before, and it was like, aside from Ergies, however the hell you want to say it, Dissidia was one of the first big, fully fleshed out fighting games. Arena-style fighting, with 3D models and whatnot, or, 3D arenas, 3D models, stuff like that. Dissidia, honestly, was so freaking fun. I love how they included the characters. I like how they did the story mode, even though it was a little pretentious. I love the stories with the characters. I love that all the main characters, or the representing characters from each of the numerical games, because this was before 15, so there was no Noctis. But like a lot of people were, it's so funny because like a personal story of mine. So many people are like, who's the main character of 6? And I've always said it was Terra. Some people said it was Locke. Some people said it was Celis. Some people have said this. Some people have said that. I'm like, it's Terra. And Dissidia's flat out said it's Terra because they got Terra in there. And I thought it was also cool how in Duodecim that they brought in Lightning, they brought in Tifa, they brought in Yuna, and they brought in Kain, as well as a few others that they brought in there. I thought that was pretty cool. Plus, Garbranth got brought in there as well. Plus, the EX burst finishing moves were so freaking cool. Seeing their limit breaks and then bringing imagination to the big finisher moves and just the moveset in general to previous characters. I thought both Dissidia games were freaking awesome. Now, here is another one that people are divided on: Final Fantasy II. It's okay. Final Fantasy II is a controversial game. Not only because it had to follow Final Fantasy I. Not only that, but because it was nothing like one. It was because it was nothing like one. And it was nothing like one in the biggest aspect, and that was its gameplay. The way that it differentiated from one is instead of garnering experience points to level up your characters and stuff like that, all characters were kind of a blank slate. Some, like Firion, was your more average character. Guy was one that leaned more towards strength and higher health. Maria leaned more towards speed or agility and magic. Now, you had those slates set for them. However, the way that they did the leveling up system in this game was not based on experience points. It was based on your actions. For example, if you equipped Firion with a sword, and the more he used that sword, the higher his sword stat became. It also leveled up his strength and stuff like that. Certain weapons leveled up certain stats as well. And so it was more of the more you use it, the better you became with it. But that also applied to everything else. For example, the only way to raise your MP in this game was you literally had to use every bit of your MP. You had to use it up, then the max went up, then you had to restore it and literally use it over and over again. Same with certain spells. You wanted to get better with the cure spell, you had to use the cure spell over and over and over again. You wanted to raise your health, and this is where a lot of jokes come in with Final Fantasy 12 or 2. The only way to raise your health is to take hits, is to get hit. What's one of the easiest ways to raise your health? Hit your own characters. Find an easy mob like a goblin or something like that, and just have all your characters attack each other, and you'll raise your health super fast. Now, it is unique. It is very unique in that aspect. It is also extremely grindy. Like, in a lot of ways, it is grindier than Final Fantasy 1. Because at least with Final Fantasy 1, there was a number you knew you were working towards. And while that is there in Final Fantasy 2, and while you did have a lot more freedom when it came to customization, and while that aspect is cool, it is also a point of contention and division with a lot of Final Fantasy fans. But you also had... the thing with there was a word system involved where certain words progress the story and stuff like that. It's kind of like a keyword system they put in there. You never really saw that come back either. And there might have been a reason that they did away with this. And also with this particular system, as far as like raising stats and stuff like that with certain items, spells, stuff like that, you never really saw it come back in this form ever again. And again, there might have been a reason for that because... just because it was such a drastic change. The story, however, is also not the most complex. Evil Emperor taking over the world. Firion and his friends are orphans. They join a rebellion. They fight against the Evil Emperor. And all your assist characters die. Except for like one. But like all your assist characters die. Seriously, every assist character that you get in this game, majority of them end up dying. Like seriously. So... it's okay. Sometimes I will go back to 2 on occasion for a couple of years, something like that. But honestly, it's okay. It's okay. It's not bad. It's okay. But I would definitely not say it was stupid. Now, here in my opinion is where things started to turn around for the better for Final Fantasy. Now, we personally did not get this one till later. I have played both variations of this game. I've played the DS version, and I also have played I've also played the NES Famicom version. In fact, I have an NES version of it right here. And of course, the game I'm talking about is Final Fantasy III. Now, this first one right here is the Famicom version. Now, I'm just going to say this. The Famicom version is okay. And it's only okay in the fact that it harkens back to Final Fantasy I, where the characters are just blank slates, the Onion Kids. You name them what you want. They have no personality. The game is cool, though, because this is the game where they introduced the job system, or the interchangeable job system. You could switch between jobs from warrior to thief to ninja to white mage to sage to dark knight. You know, this is where the job system finally popped up, and it was something brand new. You know, it wasn't just you chose your job at the beginning and now you're stuck with this the rest of the game. You could change it, but you did need a certain amount of currency in order to change it, in order to swap your job. You couldn't just do it whenever you wanted when you were out on the world map. It introduced the Cloud of Darkness as a villain, and for that it was okay. Now, I will say this, the DS version is hella good. And in my opinion, way better than the original Famicom version because, one, they took away the penalty of when you would swap jobs instead of there being a certain amount of currency. They got rid of that, thank God. At least I think they did. I'm pretty sure they did. They opened up more jobs that were not in the original game. They made a very good transition from 2D into 3D, but also they actually gave these characters names like Luneth, and they actually gave them personality, and they gave them story, and they actually gave them background, and they gave them a lot of depth. For that, and because it was fun as hell, and it was so great to finally see this game, because we never had gotten to see this game over here in the States. So finally getting to see it, at least in some kind of form, was really cool. I would absolutely go back and play 3. Absolutely. I can't tell what that is. Is that After Years? After Years is dumb and is a sequel we never asked for. Honestly, I don't give a crap about Sayador being Cecil and Rose's son. Honestly, Final Fantasy IV, in my opinion, did not need a sequel. The story, I thought, had a fantastic beginning, middle, and end with all the characters, memorable characters. And while, yes, it was cool to see those characters evolve, and if they were going to do a sequel, I honestly wish they had done one better than this. Because, quite frankly, in my opinion, After Years was a crappy game. And especially with the way that they released it originally on the Wii, where it was like this episodic game, I absolutely hated that they did that. And they did finally rectify it, you know, years later when they re-released the game on the complete collection and didn't do that episodic crap. But even then, the system they have in place with the lunar settings and whatnot is completely unforgettable. And not only that, it's just not a lot of fun. After Years is crap. I hated it. I didn't play that. All the Bravest is a cash grab money mobile game. War of the Dimensions, no. Brigade, didn't play it. And now here we go. The Legend games, or also known as in Japan, SaGa. Now, we thought they were legit Final Fantasy games. We thought these were legit Final Fantasy games. I sure as hell thought they were, because they certainly played like legit Final Fantasy games. They were traditional turn-based combat. They had a experience point leveling up system, in most of them anyway. And then I noticed something that was never in any other Final Fantasy game, and that was transforming your characters. And what I mean by that was when you went into a battle in any of the SaGa games, sometimes either a part of the monster or a part of the machine or whatever the hell it was you were fighting would fall down, and your character could either attach that to them or devour it. And what that would do was it would transform your character into something similar like the enemy you just fought. Now, that would open you up to unique abilities. That would also open you up to unique weapons. Like, for example, robots in the original SaGa game, in like, I want to say like SaGa 1 and 2 or Final Fantasy Legend 1 and 2, robots were the only character or type of character that could equip guns. And then in Legend 3, SaGa 3, just about anybody could. But it opened unique magic. It was something I had never seen before in a Final Fantasy game. The story in SaGa 1, Legend 1, it was okay. It wasn't really that memorable. So for that, I would say Legend 1 is okay. I would say SaGa 2 is really shway. Legend 2, SaGa 2 is really shway. Just because the story got a lot better. It was, an end of the world plot and stuff like that. Finding these, the Magi or these crystals and whatnot. But the cool thing was the Magi crystal things that you find had unique abilities and spells and stuff like that. That it not only it helped you in battle, but they helped you interact and explore the world as well. Plus, it was a really good narrative point where it was like this big treasure hunt to find these powerful artifacts and save the world and whatnot and become stronger. SaGa 3, Legend 3 is freaking super shway. Because this is also a SaGa game, not a Final Fantasy game. And I know I'm bringing up time travel, and I said, don't bring up time travel around KB because he gets weird. But this is actually a Final Fantasy-ish game, in my opinion, that I thought was really cool with time travel because the entirety of the plot is based around time travel. And you time travel in a aircraft called the Falcon that looks like a Blackwing bomber, but you travel back and forth in the past and the future, interacting with characters that you knew in the present, and it ended up altering the story. There's the legendary swords like Murasame, Masamune, Excalibur, Durin, the Emperor sword, stuff like that. There's the legendary swords that are in the game, and stuff like that retained the transformation stuff, but it went a little more traditional Final Fantasy because your characters could learn magic, like from shops and stuff like that, the weapons and stuff. It also had more of a traditional leveling up, with experience points, whereas SaGa 2 and 1 did not do that. But SaGa 3, brought back experience points and whatnot. Plus, SaGa 3 had really kick-ass music as well. So I love SaGa Final Fantasy Legend 3. Absolutely love it. Pitologica, didn't play it. Tactics Advance. This is another one of contention. Now, I'm a guy that played Tactics 1, and I'll tell you what I think of Tactics 1 later. Although this might give it away how I feel about the original Tactics. Tactics Advance, in my personal opinion, was meh. And the reason why I say it was meh, because in a game like Tactics, where one of the biggest features is customization and freedom of customization, the fact that they introduced the judgment system and with the judges and limited you and then punished you for wanting to free up your customization. Like, I'm serious. There were certain times that you could not use certain spells, certain classes, stuff like that. And if you did it, you would lose the character. Like, the judges would come and arrest your character and you lost that character. And while it was only temporary, the fact is, it was something that, in my opinion, it was a hurdle that the game put in there. That it was a hurdle that wasn't necessary. Because if anything, it was just a pain in the butt. You know what? Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is stupid. You want to know why? Because I've only wanted to play this game twice in my life. Played it the first time, absolutely had a miserable experience. Hated the story, didn't like it. Tried it again a few years later to think, okay, maybe I'm judging this game too harshly. Nope, I was wrong. It was stupid. I had a terrible time with it. I absolutely detest this game. I really do. Final Fantasy Adventure. This is much like SaGa. This is not really a Final Fantasy game. This, in fact, is part of the Seiken series, or as some people know it as, Mana, the Mana series. And what do I think of Final Fantasy Adventure, aka Seiken 1? I think it is Ultima Shway. I think Final Fantasy Adventure, Seiken 1, the first game out of the entire Mana series, I think it is an amazing Ultima Shway freaking badass game. Why? Because it has a gameplay style very akin to Legend of Zelda, with its its overhead, peer down, exploration style like that. It has a combat and actually an active combat system. It's not turn-based combat. You do have a charge-up system with your sword. There's a magic system in place with the additional characters. It is an amazing game. It's different. They introduced the mana tree and stuff like that. It's very different from your typical fantasy adventures and stuff like that. And honestly, you actually do have the ability to play this because they re-released the Mana Collection. This game is on the Mana Collection, and I highly recommend anyone play this game. Final Fantasy Adventure, Seiken 1, the first of the Mana series, is an amazing game, and you're only doing yourself a favor by trying this game out. Like, I would play this game to death, and I still play this game to death. I freaking love Final Fantasy Adventure Seiken 1. 15 Pocket Adventure, nope. The hell, nope, I didn't play that one either. Nope, didn't do that one. I did not play Mobius. What is, this is an interesting one. This is Final Fantasy IV, the remake. When they remade this on DS. And it's also on Steam, so you can play it on there as well. This is when they took Final Fantasy Final Fantasy War. No, Final Fantasy IV, made it a full 3D game, gave it voiceovers, and changed up the combat system with abilities that you could swap in and out. And because of that, it is super shui. Because it doesn't deviate too hard from the story. They only take a few liberties here and there. But the voice acting, I thought, was very top-notch. I thought the battle system, changing up the battle system with the abilities that you could, the custom abilities you could learn and swapping them out and stuff like that, I thought that was really awesome. I thought how they changed up Rydia by giving her her own custom summon creature was really cool. I thought how they changed up Cecil's darkness ability was really cool. Instead of a projectile, it was just like a buff, you know? That was really cool. I thought the 4 3D remake was extremely well done. It also added a lot of replay value because you wanted to go back and unlock those abilities. For example, and they also had tag team maneuvers in there as well. Like certain characters could do abilities together and like certain moves would happen. For example, Rosa and Cecil using their abilities together, their little tag team abilities together, they could actually use Ultima. Ultima was not in the original game, but Cecil and Rosa working together, a paladin and a white mage working together, boom, Ultima. I know, it's crazy, but it was so cool to see that. I love 4 Remake. It's a great game. You should play it. Tactics A2 didn't play it because Tactics Advance 1 pissed me off. OG! Final Fantasy 1. It's okay. And that might make some people mad. But hear me out. Final Fantasy 1 is a legendary game. It's what got us here from the get-go. That being said, there's also a lot of stuff in Final Fantasy 1 that, in my opinion, has not aged very well. And I say this entirely from a gameplay perspective, not appearance, not music, not dialogue. I accept the fact that it's blank slate characters, you know, unknown adventurers. I accept all that. I am cool with that. I am strictly talking about the gameplay itself. The grind is hella hard in this because it's an old school game, so Lord knows that's what they do. The targeting system with that, like, for example, you tell a character to target this character. Well, if another character kills that enemy and your other character that you chose to attack first didn't go, they would completely miss their turn and their turn was wasted. Now, some people would say that this is a thing of strategy that they added into the game, and it's very D&D-esque, you know, or esque and whatnot. Personally, I get what they were going for, but I was still not a fan of it. I was like, I don't want to spend, because it basically comes down to this. It got to the point where I was like, every battle is taking 10 minutes. Oh my God. I just want to progress the game. And I feel like I'm stuck in the same battle. And if you went up against certain enemies, that could happen. You'd be stuck in these battles for a very extended amount of time. And I'm going to sound hypocritical in a minute when I talk about another game that has longer duration battles, but you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. But yeah, because of that, because of the gameplay aspect, and because the grind is hella hard, and also, yeah, like Khan said, the enemy encounter rate in Final Fantasy 1 is like, holy shit, calm down, video game. But because it's what got us here, it is not a bad game or a stupid game. It's okay. But there's a reason I go back to later iterations of this game. See, even Rocky agrees. That's why he's barking. There's a reason I go back to re-releases of this game and remakes and remasters of this game instead of popping this one in all the time, as legendary as it is. There's a reason I go back to the remasters and the remakes, because they took that main gripe that I had, which was the gameplay, and refined it. And they refined it. And they made it smoother. They made it more engaging. And they also sped it up. Because, look, I ain't got time to be here all day. Now, some people love this aspect of it, and that is completely fine. But that's also why I say the game is not garbage. It's okay. It's okay. The remakes and remasters of it later just did it better. Theat Rhythm? Nope. Oh, God. Nightmare. Nightmare. Look. All I'm going to say is this. They tried. They tried. They failed. But they tried. They hella failed. But they tried. Now here. They blew it out of the water. And to this day, they are still blowing it out of the water. 14, A Realm Reborn. This is one of the best MMOs on the planet. And the reason it's one of the best MMOs on the planet is because of one man, Yoshi P, and him saving this game, aka saving this company, but also doing something that so many other games get wrong. Because here's the deal about Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Here's the thing about it, okay? Yeah, it's an MMO. It's an MMO second. It's an MMO second and a Final Fantasy game first. And that's where they got wrong with the original iteration of Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. They focused too hard on it being an MMO and not enough on it being a Final Fantasy game. They switched this around in 2.0, A Realm Reborn, and further. And because they did that, it is nothing but a success story. And continues to be nothing but a success story. Wonderful gameplay. Engaging gameplay. Variety of choice between jobs, roles, and crafting and gathering. Mounts. Glamour or transmog. You get housing. You get some of the most beautiful graphics in gaming there is out there right now. I mean, it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful game. You get a story that is Final Fantasy to a T, and when a lot of people thought it would not get any better than Heavensward, Shadowbringers came along and shattered expectations. Shattered every expectation that everyone had about this game. Endwalker's coming up. The same people that did Shadowbringers are doing Endwalker. This game continues to be a success story not only in video gaming, but it continues to be a success story of devs that, and I say this is the number one rule of video gaming, it continues to be the success story of a development team that gives a shit. That is why it is Ultima Shui. 9. 9 is God tier. 9 is a God tier game. It is a freaking God tier game. Memorable characters, wonderful music, a story that touches on the essence of so many varying factors, which is loyalty, the feeling of wanting to belong to society, finding your purpose, finding your identity, helping out your friends, things like that. There's so many variables with the characters, and the characters are given wonderful stories and proper time for their stories to flesh out. You have a unique battle system with the abilities that unlock through gear, which is something that hadn't been done before in Final Fantasy. You have, my God, I already mentioned the music. Amazing music. And like I said, memorable characters. Steiner, Garnet, Vivi, Amaranth, Zidane, Freya, Quina. I mean, just memorable. Eiko, memorable as hell characters. I mean, really. 9 is a God tier game. I love it to death. If you haven't played 9, go play it. Like, holy shit, go play it. Final Fantasy Tactics, speaking of which. Yeah. Tactics. In fact, Final Fantasy Tactics. They did something they've never done before. And it's something they have not done again. They kind of did it with Final Fantasy Heavensward. Had a story that, quite frankly, was extremely dark. And also talked about something that they don't really touch on a whole lot in, and that is corruption not only in monarchy, which they have done that, but also corruption in religion. They basically took the story of the War of the Roses and tied in, the historical, events of the War of the Roses, and tied in corruption from church and religion, and tied it all in together, and also brought in demonic forces, manipulation, betrayal, stuff like that. Tactics is a very, very mature, dark, dramatic, and in a lot of ways a very sad story. There's not a lot of happiness in Final Fantasy Tactics as far as its story is concerned. It's a very, very mature story. Like, I would say things like even 7, 8, and 9 in the PS1 era of Final Fantasy, those games are, in my opinion, a lot more lighthearted than Tactics was. Tactics is not, it has like these very rare moments of lightheartedness and these happy moments. But they are very far and few between, because that plays into the world that this game exists in. And the world itself that this game exists in, which is Evilus, is not a kind, happy world. It's a very war-torn, very dark, and in a lot of ways, a very evil world. A lot of bad things happen in Evilus. And 9 times out of 10, it is the innocent that pay the price for the deeds of the elite. So, yeah, it's a very, 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 very mature story. Now, I made a comparison earlier where I said Final Fantasy I's battle system, in my opinion, makes the game take too long. Tactics does as well, because it is a tactical RPG. It's not just your normal, typical turn-based RPG. Tactics takes it a step further and turns it into a tactical RPG, but also these battles can take a while. Now, given that, why did I rate it so much higher than Final Fantasy I? Well, because of this. 1, you have the advantage of actually moving your characters around and actually being strategic. 2, you have gameplay that is actually engaging and fun. And 3, you're not bound by a singular class that you chose at the beginning of the game, because Tactics 1 also brings back the job system from 3 and 5. And you can change them outside of battles. You also can customize your character's abilities. There is a massive list of loot and armor. There's stealing. The music is amazing. The maps are polygon 3D maps. and they're variable. No map is the change. You have environmental settings that can happen. You have the ground itself can change your strategy. There's all kinds of variables that go into Final Fantasy Tactics where no battle is ever the same twice. It's never the same twice. And because of that, Tactics is a god tier game. It really is. 7. OG 7 is Super Shui. I don't put it in Ultima Shui because there's a few that I just love a little more than this one. But to deny that 7 is probably one of the great... You know what? No. I'm not going to put it in Ultima Shui. I'm going to stick by what I said. To deny, though, that it is one of the most game-changing games, not only in the RPG genre, but also in its franchise, Final Fantasy, but also that it is a game-changing game as far as video games, period. This game not only put Final Fantasy on the map as far as being mainstream, because before that, 4 or 2, as we knew it as 2 and 3 and 1, they did okay over here, but they weren't these big, super mega, oh my god, popular games. They just weren't yet. 7 changed everything. 7 changed everything for this franchise, changed it for its genre, changed it for video gaming as a whole. Because of how dynamic the story was, how engaging the story was, how at the time there were just graphics that were just not like that. There were graphics not like that. There really weren't. There really weren't. There was nothing that put out the quality. Oh, screw it. You know what? Put it up there. It's earned it. There was nothing at the time that put out the quality that this game put out. Characters that you'll always remember. Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, Kite Sith, Yuffie, Vincent, Sid. You know, you'll always remember. Red 13, you'll always remember these characters. You'll always remember its villains, from President Shinra to Rufus to Sephiroth. Music, you'll always remember. There's a reason that I call One Winged Angel the Jaws theme of Final Fantasy. And not just Final Fantasy, but it's like the Jaws theme of video gaming. You hear the first few notes and you crap your pants because you know something terrible this way comes. 7 is a Ultima Shui game. It's god tier. 8. It's pretty Shui. Some people are also divided on this game. Some people are divided on it because, look, it is what it is. It is a teen romance game. That is the basis of this story. It is a romance story between Squall and Rinoa. It is. 8 did have its flaws. The draw system wanted to make me pull the hair from my follicles. I never want to see this system as it was implemented in the original 8. I never want to see the draw system come back. That was one of the worst grinds I've ever had in an RPG. Ever. I hate the draw system. I hate it. And yes, there were other ways you could get around it, like with the card system and stuff like that. But even then, I shouldn't have to go out of my way just to be able to make my characters survivable, you know? Now, to be fair, the battle system was pretty cool, and I actually did think the junction system with the Guardian Forces summon creatures and learning abilities like that and raising your stats this way. Now, I thought that part was really cool, and using magic to increase your stats. That part was cool. It was just getting the magic, period. I hated it. I hated the draw system. Now, story-wise, some people either love the story or they hate it. Personally, I think the story's fine because it is what it is. You have a love story with Squall and Renoa. You have this military-style story, you know, school, academy-style story with Balam Garden, Galbadia, and stuff like that. You have the thing going on with the Sorceress, with Idea and Ultimacia. Even though my biggest gripe with Ultimacia is she's one of those in-game bosses that you don't really see her until the very end. Now, in some cases, that can work. For example, Sephiroth, it worked extremely well because there was all this build-up throughout the game about who this guy was. And then he would pop, and then whenever Sephiroth popped into not only to the conversation but into the scene itself, it had meaning and impact. Ultimacia didn't give the same impact, in my opinion, especially when they were building up Idea for who I thought was going to be the big baddie. Turns out she wasn't. She was mind controlled. So, in that essence, I thought that it was a little bit of a cop-out as far as Idea was concerned. Had they built up Ultimacia throughout the game, it probably would have left a better impact as far as making a mysterious, enigmatic villain that you don't see till the end. Because you literally, with the exception of one scene, you literally do not lay eyes on Ultimacia until the final battle. And I'm not making that up. There's one little scene where you get like a glimpse of her, but you literally do not see Ultimacia until the very end. For its flaws, it has more good to offer. It really does. It really does. It has, in my opinion, more good to offer. The battle system is good. The music is good. The story is passable. It's not perfect, but it's passable. The world itself is fun to explore. The side quests with Odin and Bahamut and Ultima Weapon are extremely fun. While challenging, they are extremely fun. So, for its flaws, Final Fantasy VIII is pretty shway. 10. 10. 10. 10. Oh, that's right. I went there. 10 is Ultima Shui. 1, that laugh that you will never forget. 2, the story is good. Flawed, but good. Blackjack, thank you for the host. It's good. The story is actually good. Because while 10-2 lost their damn mind, 10 told the story where the focus was not necessarily Tidus. Tidus was there. But in my opinion, Tidus was not the main character. It was Yuna. It told the story of Yuna, this summoner who had to face these trials to learn the summoning arts of these particular creatures and had a tune with them. When at the end of the day, it was a pilgrimage for self-sacrifice for this monster that ravaged the world, and all it was doing was the status quo. This was a story, a tragic story about this girl that was just the next in line of the status quo, of self-sacrifice to appease this monster. When really, that's really what it was, to appease this monster and to appease this world, and breaking that cycle. Breaking that cycle of self-destruction, finding worth in yourself, and finding out that the people around you actually care about you. In that aspect, I absolutely love the story of 10. In that aspect of that story, for that character period, I love that story of 10. And for that, in my opinion, it makes Yuna a good character. Is the romance between Tidus and Yuna a little forced? A little. But it's better than Squall and Renoa. Because in my opinion, Squall and Renoa was a little more forced. Whereas with Yuna and Tidus, you actually do see growth happen between them. You also have the dynamic story with Orin, Kimari, Lulu, and Riku, and Waka. And Waka. You had one of the best mini games in Blitzball. You had an amazing customization gameplay mechanic with the grid sphere system. You had these badass looking graphics. It's one of those games that I describe as this is one of those games that they wanted to show off. This is what the PS2 can do. Check this shit out. You want to see the PS2 performing at peak performance? Pop this into your PS2. Watch this shit spin. It was amazing. Yeah, and it addressed a very, very controversial story with racism in the game between the Albed and Riku and Waka and the rest of the world. It was a very, controversial story element that got brought into it that never had been done in Final Fantasy before. And it was addressed and told wonderfully. Like, for a long time, I hated Waka. I was like, you're an asshole. What'd these Albed ever do to you? And so it was a really cool story they told with the Albed and the rest of the world. It really was. Yeah, and Yuna making him rethink why he was a racist. Yeah, I mean, he was. It was racism against the Albed. It was. It absolutely was. Because basically they thought, and not just racist, but basically also looking down at a certain group of people as subhuman for not following the same religious beliefs as you do, because it got into religion as well. And like Tactics, one of the few games that really touched the topic of religion, it really, really kind of touched on that. And so because of that, 10 is an amazing game. Plus, it did something that no other Final Fantasy game had done at that point. The way that you used the summon creatures. Actually bringing them into the battle and controlling them, giving them movesets and abilities. Love it. I love it. I love it for that. 10-2. Nothing needs to be said about this game. This is when Square Enix obviously decided to snort the cocaine. And, yeah. Look, the dress sphere system was neat, but that does not make up for a shitty-ass narrative that shit all over this great story that they told just to get $60 out of you for fan service. You want fan service? It's free on Google. Type it up. 11. 11 is still going to this day. 11 is still going. 11 is still going to this day. Still getting support, still getting content. It was very different. It was not your turn-based typical Final Fantasy. It was also a chore. It was a chore. Like old school, kick your ass chore. In so many of its quest lines. However, this game does predate World of Warcraft and so many other MMOs, with one of the few exceptions being like EverQuest. However, because of the cool-ass stories they told, because of the big change in visuals that they introduced to gaming at the time, and because it is still supported to this day and has a loyal fan base and has refined over time, and because it has a deep customization system with its job system, it's pretty schway. 12. When I talk about 12, I am talking about Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Age. Because here's the deal. When Final Fantasy XII first came out, my experience with it was not a positive one. It was a battle system that I just was not enjoying. I thought that implementing the thing of every decision you make as far as customizing your characters with their job and abilities and it being final, I thought it was a massive step back for Final Fantasy. And then Zodiac Age happened and fixed all of that. And then the battle system and customization abilities became an absolute joy to unlock, to play around with, to customize. And further explaining in better detail how the gambit system works, Zodiac Age of Final Fantasy XII fixed, for me personally, everything that was wrong with the original 12. It fixed it. Now look, you might say, or some might say, but Van's a dumb character. And to that I say this. Van's not the main character. Balthier and Fran are the main characters. Tell me I'm wrong. You can't. Because I'm not wrong. And because my experience of it turned around so much into such from a down in the dirt, I don't ever want to touch this again, to holy shit, I can't put this down. It is an Ultima Shui game. Everyone needs to try Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Age. Not the original. Zodiac Age. How do you know, and look, to further prove my point, how do you know, how can you tell that I have loved 12, that I have fallen in love with 12 Zodiac Age so much? One, I've live streamed it multiple times. Two, you know I have become a fan of something when I own it on 2 different platforms. This one's gonna be fun. Oh, this one's gonna be fun, man. Let me warm up for this one. 13. There's a lot to be said about this game. So many people consider this to be the moment that Final Fantasy took a nosedive and Square Enix lost their damn mind. Personally, I thought 10-2 was the moment that Square Enix lost their damn mind. And then I took off my early 2010-ish rose tinted goggles. And I tried it again years later. And you know what I found? "13 is pretty shui." I know the stigma from the internet is to immediately condemn this game. Why? Because it's linear? Because it's a corridor game? It is. And that is a flaw with the game. However, what cannot be denied is the fact that at that time, those were some of the most impressive visuals. And it was very good visuals. It had excellent music. They were improving in their voice acting department. Lightning herself, and for anybody that says Lightning is the problem with 13, I am here to put an exclamation, period, whatever punctuation mark to put this into this statement. Lightning is not the problem with Final Fantasy 13. The problem with Final Fantasy 13 is the fact that they played it too safe. Way too safe. As far as branching out in new directions and making it this big, expansive game. They played it, I felt like they played it too safe and they restricted themselves. And part of that is maybe they were trying to maybe back off from what they did from 12. Or 2, they were banking on everyone getting invested in this game so they would want to be invested in the sequels. Now, I don't really know what the thinking was behind all that, and nobody outside of the Square Enix developmental department really has the trite and true answer to that. And if you say you have the trite and true answer to that, then you better show me when and where you worked for Square Enix and actually worked on this game and its story, because if you didn't, then nobody really knows. But Lightning was not the problem. True, it did feel a bit sluggish, but the battle system was actually fun. The story was actually pretty decent. It was a pretty decent story. It was memorable. I loved the tie-in she had with Odin in the Densetsu Ken, you know? True, the side characters and supporting cast may not have been the most, the most memorable. Because I'll be honest with you, I can't really remember the rest of the crew, but I do remember Lightning, and I do remember her story, and I do remember that really fun battle system. So for that, 13, 7 out of 10. 13-2. Wasn't bad. 13-2 was a bit of a step ahead as far as progressing, as far as making the previous iteration of the game a little better. I wasn't a fan of the fact that the main focus shifted really a lot away from Lightning and onto her sister. Personally, I don't really care a whole lot about her sister. I personally don't. Honestly, I can't remember a whole lot about the story of this one, but I thought the battle system was pretty neat. For that, it gets to be pretty shway. Lightning returns! It's also pretty shway. Focus shifted back to Lightning. Into the world scenario happening and whatnot. Loved the fact that Lightning had access to different variations of jobs, armor classes, and outfits and stuff like that. Loved that. Thought that shit was pretty cool. I still think it was not the best of the 13 trilogy, but I would not call any of the 13 trilogy games, I would not call them garbage. I just wouldn't. Final Fantasy Type 0. Was not interested. 15. Meh. I didn't really care for Bro Trip the game. However, I will put it up to it's okay. For 3 reasons. 1, hella fun battle system. 2, breathtaking visuals. 3, the story was really good. When DLC wasn't holding it back. Because that is what prevents 15 from being up here. The fact that they chose to neuter this game's story by withholding elements from its main story with DLC. I'm serious. If you ever just want to play, if you ever want to play 15, you want to play it in its entirety and to make sure you have it in its entirety, get the Royal Edition of 15. That way you'll have everything. If you get the vanilla version of 15, you are missing a shit ton of story. And it's important story. Like, it is important. Yeah, it was major plot elements. Not side stuff. Major plot elements was in DLC. Dimensions! I don't even need to explain why. It's just 4. Four was the reason that I became a fan of Final Fantasy. 4 was also one of the first major RPGs that I ever played when I was a kid. 4 is some of the most memorable characters in the entire franchise. Cecil, Kain, Rosa, Rydia, Edge, Yang, Cid, Palom, Tella, Edward. I mean, what a cast of characters. And a game that plays to the traditional Knights, Dragons, Wizards fantasy tropes. But it took it a step further from the original Final Fantasy by throwing in a redemption story with the character in Cecil going from Dark Knight to Paladin. It threw in a love story between him and Rosa. It threw in a betrayal story with Kain. It threw in versions of self-sacrifice with Palom and Tella, and even Edward and Yang. Your other characters kind of die off in this game a lot. They kind of took a lot of nods from 2. Except when it happened in 4, it was like, you remembered it. It also broadened or widened out the exploration aspect. It brought in some of the coolest spells in Final Fantasy that had not been there yet, like Meteor, Twin Magic, stuff like that. It brought in cool ass shit like that. Cure 4, stuff like that. It brought in the fact that one thing I loved about this is that the characters' classes and jobs further defined their characters. It wasn't just a blank slate character and this was their job and it didn't matter to the plot. No, their character classes actually mattered to the plot. It mattered that Cecil was a Dark Knight. It mattered that Cain was a Dragoon. It mattered that Rosa was a White Mage and an Archer. It mattered even further that Edward was a Bard. Yang was a monk. You know, Sid was an engineer. It mattered that Rydia was a summoner who her story actually revolves around dealing with trauma, you know, with her mother's Miss Dragon Eidolon being killed, and then her whole village gets destroyed because of the inadvertent actions of Cecil. She overcome, and for the longest time, she doesn't know the fire spell for the longest time. And it's because she was so traumatized by her experience of what happened to her village being burned down that she refused to use the fire spell. And there's, in one of the more touching moments of the game, when you're climbing the mountain where you're going to go meet Yang, there's ice blocking the path. And Rosa says, hey, Rydia, you're a summoner, right? Well, you should be able to use fire, right? And she refuses to do it because she hates fire, because all it does is remind her of what happened. And so she's bound by her trauma. Thankfully, with the encouragement of her friends, she overcomes her trauma and actually learns the fire spell and actually learns to use it to help people. That was actually one of the more touching moments of the game. And then she comes back later on, she's grown up, and she's this badass summoner, you know, that's further explored into her black mage arts. She's a badass. And in fact, she's also my favorite character in the entire game. Rydia is like the reason I play this game. She's such a badass character. I love the moment when you're fighting Golbez the first time and you're about to lose and he's got your ass beat and crippled. He's got you dead to rights. And Rydia comes in with her Mist Dragon, blows away Golbez's Shadow Dragon, and saves the party. I absolutely love that. That's one of those moments in video gaming that I will never forget. I will always remember that because the first time I played it, I had no idea. I thought I was doing something wrong. I was like, I'm going to die. This sucks. I'm going to die. I've come this far. I'm going to die. And then Rydia shows up and saves everybody. It was badass. I loved it. It was one of those moments that you just never forget. 5. Pretty shui. The characters, they're okay. Bartz himself is kind of a sandpaper character. I was not a big fan of Bartz or the characters. I wasn't even really that big a fan of the story. But a lot of that was because it had to follow 4. And in my opinion, 4 had a better story than 5 did. However, 5 was a great game because of, one, bringing back the job system and being able to change out the characters' classes and jobs. I keep saying classes and jobs. Being able to change out the characters' jobs, being able to learn abilities from those jobs, stuff like that. So you had all kind of variances with that. You had a pretty good little battle system. And you had a really cool way of unlocking the ultimate weapons at the end of the game. Plus, the battle with X-Death was really cool. Plus, it also introduced, for the first time, the boss battles, the secret. But it introduced the aspect of super bosses with Omega and Shinryu, who in later games, 14, would actually come into the plot. So, for that, 5 is pretty cool. Plus, you had one of the bigger, more epic moments in a Final Fantasy game at the time with the battle on the big bridge and the recurring humorous themes of Gilgamesh. So, for that, 5 is pretty shway. It's not a bad game. It's pretty shway. 6. 6 is ultima shway. Top 3. Easy. No hesitance whatsoever. 6 is one of those games that it's one of those games that, quite honestly, I would honestly say there is nothing. I would honestly and for truly say that there is nothing wrong with this game. From its narrative, expansive narrative, to its gameplay, to its customization, to its visuals, to its villain. One of the few villains that actually did what he said, or did what he said he was going to do. 6 is one of those games that I actually consider perfect. It's also one of those games that I consider or recommend to everyone. If you're going to play a Final Fantasy game to get you into the franchise, the one I will always point to is 6. 6 is one of the best entry points in Final Fantasy. It really is. You have probably one of the biggest roster of characters out of all of them. Like, just thinking of them off the top of my head. You know, Terra, Locke, Celis, Edgar, Gogo, Mog, Shadow. There's so many of them. It is a huge ass roster of characters. It really is just this massive roster of characters. It's kind of hard to remember a lot of their names off the top of my head. It's a perfect game. It really is. It's a perfect game. It's a perfect game. It really is. And not only on top of that, you get to suplex a mother trucking train. Enough said. Mystic Quest! It's okay. For anybody saying Mystic Quest is a garbage game, you obviously didn't read the box art. When it says entry level RPG, this is also known in Japan as Final Fantasy USA. This was basically an easy mode Final Fantasy game that Square Enix developed to introduce younger kids that maybe have no idea what an RPG is, to introduce them to the genre. That literally is what Mystic Quest is. Is it a bad game? No. Is it bare bones? Oh yeah. Is it easy as hell? Well, you tell me if it's easy as hell. If the best way to kill the final boss is to cast Cure on it and one-shot it. I'm not making this up. So no, it's not a bad game. It's okay. It's not garbage though. Snowboarding. This was the mobile game, so no. There's another theater I don't know. This was the in-between of After Years. Didn't need to happen. That was dumb. Don't know what that is. Nope, didn't play that. I'll get to that one in a minute. G-Bike, didn't play it. No. I thought NT was stupid because they changed everything about the original Dissidia games that did not need to be changed. Record Keeper, I thought that was stupid. Didn't play that. Chocobo Racing. It's okay. Fun little racing game. Chocobo Dungeon 2, I'll be honest with you, did not play, baby. Didn't play that one. There's a lot I didn't play here. A lot of these are Japanese titles. Didn't play. Again, these are a lot. King's Knight, didn't play it. That's a mobile game. Didn't play it. Crystal Defenders was meh. Because meh. 7 Remake. This is how you remake a game. This is how you take a beloved game and remake it. Some people were like, oh, they shouldn't have changed anything. They should have just left it alone. And to those people, I say, well, you want to play Final Fantasy VII the way it was originally intended? Fine. The original Final Fantasy is available on all platforms. Go play that one if you want to play the original. But for trying something new, implementing an actually more action-oriented battle system, cranking up visuals to the freaking 12 on the meter, excellent voice acting, changing up the story, because y'all, I said this before. If you want to see the same story, go play the original 7. There's a reason it's called a remake. They change things. In a remake, some things will change, whether that be visually, gameplay-wise, or even narratively. And in this case, it was all three. 7 Remake is a Ultima Shui game. I absolutely love it! And was one of the reasons why I also got a PlayStation 5, because I can't wait to see what it looks like with those upgraded visuals, and I can't wait to see the DLC for it. 7 Remake is awesome, and I can't wait to see where they go with the rest of it. I really can't. And then the one I bet half of you have never played. Vagrant Story. Some of you may not know this. Vagrant Story is actually part of the Ivalice games. Tactics, 12, Revenant Wings. It's a part of that lineage of games. I've only played this a few times over the years. And it's pretty shui. I think it's sad that they've kind of forgotten about this game. It really is. And it's kind of hard to put to words what the story is of Vagrant Story. It's kind of hard to put to words. In fact, I'm kind of having a hard time remembering the story myself because it's been so long. However, I will say the battle system and the exploration and the 3D visuals at the time were very good. Plus, I thought it was a really cool example of Square Enix branching out and trying other stuff at the time that they were also want to do besides Final Fantasy. So, for what it was, I thought Vagrant Story was pretty shui. And I wish they would bring it back. I really wish they would. Okay, did I get them all? Okay, I think I got them all. Oh my god. I noticed they didn't put like remakes and stuff like that, or some other remakes and remasters like Anthology, Chronicles, Origin. None of that was on here. So, as well as the advanced games, which is fine and whatnot. So, there it is. There it is. That is how I would. This is how I would rank the Final Fantasy franchise. You might think differently, and that's perfectly fine. Even if you are completely wrong.